Hello, hello, I'm Kads, and welcome back to the free-to-play review. So we've got a new mechanic in the game, but it is similar to one we have seen in the past, and that is the Soul Summon Pool, similar to the Champion Summon Pool. So basically the same system, but instead of getting a small subset of, or getting offered a small subset of champions, you're getting offered a small subset of champion souls. I would assume by now that majority of you are already pretty familiar with the Prism Crystal system, but nonetheless, these are going to be extremely similar, where you have a subset of some champions that are going to be offered, in this case, champion souls. So we have a collection of rares, a collection of epics, and a collection of legendaries, and it's going to cost some amount of prism jewels in this case instead of prism fragments or crystals, and that will allow you to open a prism soulstone as opposed to a prism shard. Now this is the inaugural event, so we were all given a free summon provided you were above level 42, meaning that you have access to the Altar of Souls because it is limited after that level. And as of right now, of course, you can buy more jewels, but you cannot earn any of these jewels. So, but I would expect that in future iterations, just like they do with the normal or champion summon pool, where you can earn fragments from events and tournaments, etc. So if we are drawing a comparison between the Prism Shards and the Prism Soulstones, one thing to clarify is that even though we have these published summoning chances as well as these, which we're going to look at in a second, this does not mean that they are fixed to these values for the duration of or any future iteration of this event. They can vary. Every summon pool thus far for champions has varied substantially, maybe not substantially, but they have varied to a degree. And so it's not necessarily always going to be these values or any of these percentages, but nonetheless, it is cool to understand what exactly these are comparable to. So the main thing I want to highlight here is that even if you get the worst bottom of the barrel luck, you get stuck with a rare soul, at the very least, or the worst case, it's a 5-star soul or a 6-star soul, which at least is useful. It might not be for a rare that you care about. You might get a Valerie, for example, which wouldn't be as exciting. But if you happen to get a Cold Heart or a Renegade or a Gnarlhorn, someone that you actually use, the worst it could be is a 5-star soul, which is great because that is the accuracy resistance level, and it's a relatively high tier of whatever blessing you happen to choose. When it comes to the legendaries and the epics, the bottom is 3-star, which again is decent. At least you're not worrying about getting 1-star, 2-star. So at least it's going to be a 3-star if you get a legendary or an epic, all the way up to a 6-star as far as potential. If we take a look at the rates for this particular iteration, you can see that we have a 30% chance to get a rare, a 50% chance to get an epic. So most likely to get an epic, not most likely to get a rare, which is nice. And then a 20% chance to get a legendary. And then that further decomposes into these values here for each of those percentages to get the 5-star, 6-star, or the 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. for each of those tiers. Note, there is no chance to get a mythical soul. At least in this current iteration, that might change in the future. Who knows? At least for right now, there's no way to get a mythical soul. I guess in this case, there's no mythicals in the summon pool. And I don't think we've had mythicals in a champion summon pool either. So that might be something in the future, but we'll have to wait and see if that's actually the case. And so really quickly, I do want to pop over into my spreadsheet here, which will be linked in the description box down below if you want to check it out, where we do have a Soulstone summoning tab. And I'm not going to add this information in here because, like I said, it most likely will vary with every impending event. And I prefer for this to be a relatively static spreadsheet where it's just fixed values that we know and can work around and play around. But the main thing I want to draw your attention to here is that essentially we're looking at a slightly more powerful Immortal Soulstone minus the chance to get a mythical. So we saw a 30% chance for rare compared to a 37, so it's lower for rare, which is good. It's higher for epics, so 50% instead of 42, and then it's also higher for legendaries, 20% instead of 15. So essentially think of these, at least with the current iteration, as essentially an Immortal Soulstone in terms of potential value, but again, the value could be slightly higher because it is only looking in this summon pool, or in this pool of champion souls, compared to the entirety of the 100, or multiple hundreds of champions that it could possibly be. So just keep that in mind when you're evaluating whether or not this is something you want to participate in. Now, I will fully acknowledge that a system like this definitely caters to those who spend significant amounts of money in the game. It's definitely a Kraken whale type of thing. But nonetheless, it can still be beneficial to low spenders because every once in a while, just like with Prism Crystals or Prism Shards, whatever, you have an opportunity to get a free 1 to 2 free summons every time there is one. They're about once a month, thereabouts. And so you might get nothing, you might get something, but you can get some credit for just doing what you would normally do in the game, or doing maybe a little bit above and beyond what you normally do in the game. You could have a chance to get something cool, or you could just skip it and not worry about it. So nothing really changes. But this is most certainly, like I said, a benefit, or a bigger benefit for people who spend money, who are willing to spend money on a system like this, because they can target, Taras, for example, and really try hard in this pool of like 20 something legendaries versus the entire pool of 180 or something. Or I guess if you include Void, it's even like 200 something legendaries. So it's definitely more catered to that. And personally, I don't really have a problem with that. My overall take for systems like this is basically just indifference, because the people who are going to spend money, they're going to spend money regardless of whether or not a system like this exists. And this is just a better way potentially for them to spend their money, just to progress their accounts. But even if the system didn't exist, the whales and krakens would still be spending their money on soulstones like they have been doing anyways, maxing out their awakening for their champions. So it really doesn't affect the majority of the player base, which are low spender / free-to-play players. The whales are going to whale, the krakens are going to kraken. They're going to do what they're going to do to advance their accounts, and they're going to be fighting amongst themselves, finding out who has the best 6-star polymorph blessings between them. And the rest of us don't really have to deal with that unless you're really trying to push hard for some high levels of PvP. I know a fair amount of people always have an issue when they introduce some sort of new pay-to-win system into the game, because it furthers the gap between free-to-play and the krakens. But my personal take on that whole situation is that Raid is known for being a pay-to-win game, meaning that if you do spend money, generally speaking, you are going to progress faster and better than majority of the player base. That's the way it is designed, and it's not really hidden by any means that is the case. And so the gap between payers and non-payers has to exist, because again, the game is pay to win. If the gap didn't exist, then someone who doesn't pay would be on the same level as someone who did pay, meaning there's no reason for you to pay in the first place, and the game dies because no one's buying anything in it. So inherently in a pay-to-win game, there is going to be some gap. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Plarium has the perfect balance between a big gap and a small gap. That's up to you to decide for yourself how you feel about that. But nonetheless, I just accept the fact that there will be a gap, and it will be an ever-expanding gap, because no matter how much time you spend, someone can outspend you in terms of money regardless. So once again, in summary, yes, this is most certainly a system that will massively benefit whales and krakens more than it will benefit the average player. But at the same time, the average player, low spender, free to play, can just get a free summon every once in a while, and who knows, maybe you'll get a 6-star legendary soul for someone you really want from the summon pool, or you might get some soul that you just sell for soul coins. Either way, you're going to at least get something that is somewhat useful in terms of some currency, or a soul that you actually care about for relatively low effort, or just doing things you already do in the game. So it's still going to be a net positive for anyone who participates in these systems at any level. So as a person who does love to spectate the RNG and luck of other people, I very much look forward to seeing some Prism Soulstone opening videos from other people. Now, obviously not for myself, and just to see, how good is the system, how good is the return on investment. Of course, there is no mercy system, just like with the champion summon pools. So you're at the risk of raw odds, which we don't usually get to experience outside of shards, at least. And so, you're paying into the ether, and you may or may not actually get anything good, because there is nothing to guarantee success by pulling a certain amount. And so it's up to the discretion of the spender how much they want to go in. But like I said, I'm keen to see what people manage to get from these in the future. I do think this is probably not the one you want to participate in, because as I mentioned earlier, there's a ton of champions in this. And so if you're really looking for that one champion, like even just amongst the legendaries, there's like 30 in here. And so it's just going to be really hard to get the one that you want. Not that there aren't a bunch of good ones in here. I'm not going to go through them all. But I would wait for some future iteration of it that has something you really care about if you really wanted to try. This is probably not the one to spend it on. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the concept of a soul summon pool. Let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about the system. Do you think it's furthering the divide between free-to-play and krakens? Obviously it is. And how do you feel about it? Are you going to participate when they eventually offer free, air quotes, free opportunities to get free summons? Are you going to look at these? Are you going to ignore them? Let me know what your plans are in the comment section description down below. And of course, I will not forget that we are going to do our free summon just to see what we can manifest here. Waited till today because CVC is live. We get an epic, and it is a Geomancer. Gross, but at least it's worth 500 points. And on that note, if you did enjoy the video, then be sure to hit that like button down below and feel free to subscribe to the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.